Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Hope you guys are all having a great day so far. So in this video we'll be creating another modern family home within The Sims 4, but this time I'm actually focusing on creating a more European styled exterior for this home in particular, because I was actually looking for inspiration online and I actually noticed this one particular European home and it just had this very nice sort of unique looking exterior, and I wanted to recreate something like that within The Sims 4 as well. So yeah, it just had this very nice unique sort of like peaked roof design going on throughout the entire home, which I feel like looked really interesting, and I've been meaning to utilize these grown together slanted roof window pieces for quite a while now, and I just really never got the opportunity to utilize them because most of the builds that I'm used to creating are from like these like modern LA homes which have this like very like flat roof design, or just like these peaked roofs, but they're not really that peaked, they're sort of just like closer to the ceiling, if that makes sense. So yeah, I just started off the build by just like placing this very nice and simple rectangular pool followed by these platforms that sort of led to it, and I just felt like that looked really interesting and unique by itself as well. And I was sort of building as I was going, so I was just like adding the windows, flooring and the walls as I was sort of just like placing everything, because I wanted everything to sort of just like match and sort of have an appropriate size to it, if that makes sense. I didn't want to have one room that was way too bigger than the other, and since I was working on a 50 by 40 lot, I wanted to make sure I had enough space to sort of just like work with, if that makes sense. So yeah, I was sort of just like trying to create everything to like a more realistic scale just by like estimating how many tiles I was using for each section of the house and whatnot. And most of the windows I actually utilized throughout this entire home either came from the most recent base game update or from the greenhouse kit, which I feel like looked really nice for this home in particular, because I just really like the extra details that come for the windows itself, and I just really loved utilizing the sliding glass doors as well, which came from the most recent base game update as well, because I feel like they look really nice and interesting, and it's just like a nice one to use, and it's something that everyone has. So yeah, it's just like the perfect one to utilize for all of my modern homes, and yeah, it's just like a great one to utilize for pretty much any scenario really. And it worked really nicely for this home in particular because we were going for these medium wall heights throughout the entire home. We do also end up changing some parts of the home to also utilize tall wall heights as well, because I just feel like it looked really nice and it sort of made sense for such an extravagant home like this. And I just really loved the peaked roof that you can see throughout this entire home. Is sort of just like a very unique take for a modern mansion in my opinion, and we do actually end up making certain parts and areas of these sort of attics and roof areas sort of functional. So I did actually end up placing some like specific unique sort of stairs and just like walkways that lead to these attic areas. I don't know how functional they'll actually be, because although they can actually access it, there's not really much that you can add into it, but I will explain more of that as we progress later in the video, as we actually move on to creating the interior and the attics and whatnot. But yeah, so far you can pretty much get an idea and visual of what the actual exterior sort of looks like. So right now it sort of just like looks like a jumbled mess because it is a bit complex, and I was sort of just like trying to figure out how I wanted everything to look and just like what I want it to be like. And as you guys can probably see right now, there is sort of just like a small sort of like roof bug which has been going on for quite a few years now, and they haven't really fixed it. But yeah, I feel like once I just like sort of adjusted that, it did actually fix itself, so don't worry about any of the roof bugs. You wouldn't actually see any roofs within your builds and whatnot. But yeah, I just feel like this exterior itself just looks really nice and extravagant and works for a general sort of like typical modern family home if you guys are planning to use it for that. And we do also have a very nice and simple pool house as well right next to the swimming pool, which I feel like looks really nice, and it sort of like follows the same style and design for the exterior as we have for the main home, if that makes sense. So it also follows that huge sort of peaked roof design, which I feel like looks really nice and interesting. And yeah, I just feel like the platforms that go off and around the entire home just look really nice and extravagant, and it sort of just like makes the home feel a bit more grand in my opinion, because there's just like quite a lot more like steps. It just makes it look a bit more busy. It just makes it look a bit more like luxurious rather than having it all like flat floor, which I feel like not a lot of people would probably prefer. But yeah, I just feel like it turned out really nice overall. And of course I had to utilize those very nice glass windows on this slanted peak roof as well. But we do actually just utilize this pool outhouse area to be like a very like simple bar area, so it doesn't really house quite a lot of stuff. It does also have its own like ensuite as well, but that's pretty much it, besides like another seating area. But we do have plenty of seating going on throughout the entire home as well. So yeah, there's just like a lot more like options throughout this entire home. And I went with this very nice and simple tiled flooring throughout this entire sort of pool area, because I just feel like it looked really nice and simple. It just sort of just like worked with the sort of like style that I was trying to go for, and just like try to add some additional details around the platform areas for this exterior, because I feel like it looked really nice. Although it is still functional without it, I feel like it still looked really nice just to like add a small extra detail going on around the entire sort of like these simple lines. And I was actually quite puzzled with what kind of pool trimming that I wanted to utilize for this pool in particular, but I just ended up going for something that was like a plain white simple one that had this very nice thick outline going around it, because I feel like that looked a little bit more interesting rather than going for like a really bright color, because I really wasn't trying to add a lot of bright colors for the exterior itself. The color was mainly just for the interior of the home, if that makes sense. But yeah, this is actually where this sort of like hallway would be, that would like sort of lead you to the attic way, which I feel like was kind of like a nice interesting take for this home, especially since in The Sims attics aren't really that functional. You have to like play around with it quite a lot just to like make it work. But yeah, I feel like even if that room doesn't work itself, it doesn't really matter, because you have quite a lot of space throughout the entire home. As you guys can probably see right now, we do also have a third floor, which is technically the basement area, but it's pretty much just like a very huge home which houses like quite a lot of space. And even if you wanted to expand, just like change anything throughout this entire home, you can also add additional rooms into the basement throughout this entire home. So yeah, it's just like a very nice and simple modular modern mansion that you can just like change and alter to your liking and stuff like that. And we do also have a garageway off to the left hand side of the home, which I feel like looks really nice and interesting. It's sort of just like a nice realistic take, because I just really like creating homes that sort of just like look and feel a bit more realistic. And so just like adding that sort of small section for the garage area just like adds that extra bit of realism, if that makes sense. And I love how certain parts of this home has this sort of like poked out areas in certain parts of the home, which has this very nice black exterior, which make it stand out really nicely and contrast really well with that plain white wall that we have going on throughout the entire home. So it just makes it look a bit more interesting. And for the main entrance of the home, I actually utilized 2 arches, but I actually just like lowered 1 arch using the tool mod and actually raised it back up to sort of just like create a fake sort of like really tall archway. And this actually is a completely functional sort of technique that I actually discovered, and I just really love utilizing this in certain areas when I want to create a very grand and extravagant home, because I want to have these like really tall arches, especially if I'm using the tallest wall height. I kind of want to just like utilize a really tall arch, but we don't really have something like that in the game, so I sort of just like have to fake it with the tool mod, and surprisingly it is completely functional and it just like doesn't cause any problems. So yeah, it's just like a nice way to sort of just like create a very grand sort of entrance looking design, if that makes sense. And I really loved how it came along overall so far for the exterior itself, because it just looks really grand, especially with those really tall peaked roofs. It just looks quite like a unique take on a modern home in my opinion. And it does also have elements of it being like a farmhouse as well, because we do actually incorporate quite a lot of wood throughout the entire home as well, which you would see more of as we progress later in the video. But so far I'm just like sort of adding some additional greenery throughout the entire home, just like some extra glass windows. As I mentioned earlier in the video, we are utilizing most of the glass windows which came from the base game update, so you have most of them hopefully. If you guys don't have the most recent packs such as like the business and hobbies one, you'll probably be fine without them, to be honest, and you can easily just like replace them as well. But yeah, I also utilized the Snowy Escape huge sliding door to act as a garageway, because I just really love that door in particular to be as if it was like some sort of like fake driveway, if that makes sense. And I just skipped most of the foliage for the front of the back and the back of the home, just like showed you a few snippets of it, because I didn't want to waste your guys' time just like showing myself placing like a bunch of like repetitive plants throughout the entire home, if that makes sense. But I used a lot of the like basic general sort of American trees for the backside of the home, which I feel like looked really nice when they were all aligned together, sort of just like creating some nice privacy for that sort of basement area, which has this very nice sort of balcony area, if that makes sense. But yeah, so moving on into adding some actual furniture to this back garden area, we have these very nice sun lounge areas, and I wanted to incorporate a nice sort of like seating area to the back space of this like very huge sort of patio area. And I was quite puzzled with what kind of seating I wanted to use for the back garden area, because there's not really a lot of options when it comes to like outdoor furniture, if that makes sense. But I actually stumbled across the one from the island living one, and I just really love that one in particular. It looks really nice and modern, and it just like fits the sort of luxurious vibe that I was trying to go for, because it has these very nice simple monochrome color swatches which sort of worked out with the current style and exterior design that we're trying to go for anyway. So yeah, it overall just like made sense to sort of like utilize this black and white swatch which came with it, and I just feel like it looked really nice overall. And I just placed some 2 individual armchairs just like facing across that 3 seats. And yeah, we also just added a very huge sort of dining table right next to where the pool area is, because I wanted to add some nice outdoor seating areas just to make it feel a bit more lively, along with a nice barbecue outhouse area, as well as like a nice sort of like mini fridge and a bin, along with like the bar area that we have with the inside of the pool house as well. So yeah, don't forget about that. But also for the basement area, we do actually have pretty much just like the same layout as well. We do have a very nice sort of outdoor seating area, along with a huge barbecue area, some additional bar areas as well, and yeah, just like a nice sort of like lounging sort of like seating area as well. And I do actually add some additional seating areas to this outdoor basement area, along with for the interior for this basement as well. So yeah, we do actually have 2 kitchens in this home, as well as like 2 actual main living areas for this home for the interior, if that makes sense. And just like adding some additional bars going across throughout the entire home as well, just like trying to mimic some sort of like entertainer space, if that makes sense, because I feel like this home is relatively huge to the point where you would probably be utilizing it for entertainment, if that makes sense. And the doors that I actually utilize for the basement is sort of just like this very nice French doors, which I feel like looked really nice and fit the overall style and theme that I was trying to go for, especially since we had a lot of these like cross sort of like boxy designs for most of the windows anyway. And yeah, moving on into the interior, I didn't really show you guys most of like me creating the floor plan or whatnot, because that's way too time consuming and not really that interesting to watch in my opinion. So instead, I just showed you guys a few seconds of what the actual floor plan looked like, as well as like the wallpapers and the flooring that I have chosen. And you can pretty much get an idea of what I meant about like the farmhouse design that earlier, as like I utilized quite a lot of these like beams and columns for the interior of the home, which I feel like made it look really cozy and extravagant, especially since we did actually remove the ceiling as well. So it sort of just like has the roofing as the ceiling itself, if that makes sense. So it just made it look really nice and sort of just like a nice interesting take to this home in particular in itself. And I was actually quite impressed with how this living space turned out overall, because I just really loved how it had that direct access into the back garden areas from those huge sliding doors. And I also wanted to utilize some of the new objects that came from the businesses and hobbies expansion pack to sort of just like make this living space come alive. And I just really love how this living space turned out in particular, because I just used these very nice simple luxe seats on either side of the fireplace, along with some very nice sort of like standing lighting fixtures, as well as like this very unique sort of table. I know it's some sort of like display table to feature like selling objects, but I sort of wanted to utilize it as if it was like some sort of coffee table, because I feel like it kind of looked artsy and it sort of just like fit the vibe that I was trying to go for, with sort of just like having different like sizes of the same table, if that makes sense. So, and this was sort of just like the perfect one to utilize, even though this isn't really the main function for this object itself. I still feel like it looked really nice for this area in particular, so instead I just decided to keep it as well. And I also utilized these very nice sort of luxurious looking sofa pieces, which are modular, which came from the Dream Home Decorator game pack, because I feel like they work really nicely for creating this modern and luxurious looking vibe that I was trying to go for this living space in particular. And although I don't really utilize a lot of sort of curtains and blinds and stuff in my game, I feel like these ones in particular made sense for this home, because I didn't utilize it in many areas of the home, just in like certain areas that I felt like kind of felt necessary, because I don't really want them to like block a lot of the light that sort of enters the room itself, if that makes sense. And I did actually go with a very simple rug as well, because I feel like I was trying to go for a more modern and minimalistic theme throughout this entire home. And I also wanted to add some additional sort of storage units throughout this entire area of this living space as well. So I just used the ones that came from the Casanova cave kit, which I feel like is like a really nice and modern kit to utilize in a lot of builds. So yeah, I'll be definitely utilizing most of those objects throughout a lot of my builds in the future as well. But yeah, we're actually moving on into the sort of dining area of this home, which I feel like looks really grand and luxurious, especially since the black color of the table contrasts really nicely with the very bright sort of birch sort of timber flooring that we have going on throughout the entire home. Because usually I go for a more darker sort of oak sort of color for the flooring, but I feel like this birch color looked really nice for this home in particular, because we used a lot of these like bright or darker colors that sort of stood out and made it look a bit more interesting in my opinion. And we also utilized this very nice simple looking artsy sort of hanging pendulum light, which I feel like looked really interesting, along with that very tall sort of curved light, which I believe came from the Get Famous expansion pack. And I just raised it up into the ceiling so that you couldn't see that it was actually just like floating. And I sort of went around the entire dining table room areas, around like corners and stuff, and just like added some additional sort of like fancy curtains throughout this entire room, because I didn't want to cover most of the windows just to like prevent like it not having any light and stuff. So I wanted to keep it as bright as possible while also just like adding some additional layers to the wall itself, just by like adding some nice simple curtains and stuff to either sides of the wall, just to like make it look a bit more interesting and dynamic, because I feel like these curtains in particular just make the room look and feel just like a bit more luxurious in my opinion. And especially since we were going for these really tall wall heights, I really wanted to add some additional details to these walls just to like make sure they're not kept plain, just like to make it feel a bit more like busy. And I wanted to also add some additional details throughout this dining table area itself as well, just by like adding some additional like foliage and just like some more clutter on top of the tables as well. But yeah, moving on into the kitchen area, as I mentioned, like we're going for a more farmhousey approach and design. I just really love those wooden beams on either side of where the oven itself is. It just makes it look and feel a bit more luxurious in my opinion. And I just really love how this kitchen in particular turned out as well, because it has that very nice contrast and mixture of that bright oak wood that we're trying to go for, but then we do also have those very nice floor to ceiling black cabinets that go across the entire sort of kitchen area, which I feel like makes it look really nice and interesting. And we do also have a mixture of different cabinet colors, which I feel like makes it look and stand out a bit more in my opinion, because it just makes it look a bit more interesting. And we do also add an additional wall to one side of the kitchen just to like add a dedicated space for the fridge area, if that makes sense, because I wanted it to sort of feel as if it was like a built-in fridge area, if that makes sense. So that was sort of just like the best way that I was sort of just like able to execute the idea in my opinion. And I just feel like it turned out really nice with sort of just like mixing these two colors well together, because they contrast super nicely. And I actually did end up utilizing pretty much all of the counters to be from the most recent base game update, because I just really love how these ones looked. And these are just like pretty much like my go-to when it comes to creating and building like these modern kitchens, because it just works super nicely, especially with those marble countertop units. I just feel like it looks really nice, and it sort of fit the idea that I was trying to go for this home anyway. So yeah, it was just like a nice take for this home in particular. And I just added some additional clutter throughout this entire kitchen, and I just really loved how the end result turned out to be, because it just worked out to be exactly how I was sort of just like envisioning it to be. And it was sort of just like an interesting take to sort of place like standalone sort of oven units in the center of where the wall was, but I did actually add a half wall behind them just to make it feel a bit more realistic. But yeah, moving on into the main sort of like public bathroom area for this home in particular, I just kept it very nice and simple. I didn't actually go for the general style that I like utilizing, which is the sort of like floating sort of sink unit which came from the Drew Home Decorator game pack, but I actually just went with the more modern one which came from the Business and Hobbies expansion pack, because I feel like it looked really nice and extravagant, and that was sort of just like the main goal that I was trying to go for this home anyway. And I just paired it with a very nice and simple sink, as well as like a nice bathtub. And yeah, just pretty much it for the sort of like public bathroom area. I didn't really add a lot of details to it, because it was sort of just like a nice plain simple bathroom. And this was sort of just like the main front area, or like front foyer, or whatever you guys would like to call it. It's sort of just like a nice simple area of the home, which I feel like looked really nice and simple. And we do actually have a very nice sort of like spacious seating area right behind where the fridge wall is as well. But yeah, moving on into the primary bedroom, which is actually based on the first floor. I just feel like it kind of made sense to place it on this wing of the home, because I feel like we had quite a lot of space to work with, and it kind of made sense, especially since it was right next to the back garden area, which I actually ended up replacing one of the windows to be a door, so that they had like sort of direct access to the swimming pool area, which I feel like made it look and feel a bit more luxurious. And I went with a very nice and simple approach for this bedroom in particular, because I was trying to go for a more modern theme. So I kept it very minimal and sort of just like added some nice simplistic colors throughout this entire bedroom itself. And I did also want to incorporate a very nice simple like sort of walk-in wardrobe sort of situation, but only to like the corner of the home, or this area of this room, which I feel like made it look a bit more interesting, and sort of just like a nice take to adding some nice sort of like modular pieces to make it feel a bit more grand and luxurious. And I also added a very nice and simple rug, which I feel like contrasted really nicely with the bed duvet sort of layout and color scheme that I was trying to go for. And we do also have a very nice sort of like seating area off to the side of the bedroom as well, which I feel like made it feel a bit more grand, especially since we had a huge sort of like fireplace chimney right where that sort of fireplace is. I feel like it kind of felt a bit more realistic and sort of made sense to add a very nice sort of like seating space there. And yeah, so moving on into the ensuite area for this master bedroom, I actually really loved how this bathroom in particular turned out, because I feel like it felt and looked really luxurious. I placed placed a very huge, fancy, modern looking bathtub right in the center of where these floor to ceiling glass windows are, which I feel like made it look really luxurious. And of course added a curtain just to like add some like fake privacy or whatnot. And I actually decided to add the sink unit areas on either side of where the bathtub sort of was, which I feel like made it look really nice and interesting, and was sort of like a nice unique take, and was sort of like a nice change because I don't really utilize that sort of like design or shape or layout. So it was sort of just like a nice way to incorporate something unique into this bathroom itself. And it does also have a nice simple shower along with a simple sort of toilet as well. And I also wanted to add some additional sort of like small simple clutter pieces to make it feel like it was actually like a realistic bathroom, along with like adding some additional accent walls going on throughout this entire bathroom itself as well. And yeah, just like trying to make it feel as if it feels like a really grand and luxurious bathroom, which I feel like turned out really nicely. And we're actually moving on into the office room now, which I've actually kept really nice and simple. It does also face the front of the home as well, but it just has these very nice and simple columns on either side of this office area, which I feel like looks really nice and interesting. But I wanted to keep it really simple because I feel like there wasn't really a lot of space to work with anyway in itself. So I just sort of just like worked with what I had and sort of just like created something that was sort of just like a nice simple functional office or a painting area, because I just placed a very nice simple easel right in the center of where I placed those two different storage units, which I feel like turned out really nice overall, and just like kept it very simple with the desk as well, just like adding some realistic clutter onto it as well, just to make it feel like it was like a real office. And I feel like that was like the perfect space to create the office in my opinion, because I feel like there's not really much furniture piece that you can really add in an office anyway. But yeah, moving on into the gym area, I also added some pretty much all of the functional gym equipment that you could possibly add, and pretty much just like changed up some of the walls, as well as like adding some small sort of decor pieces which I felt like was sort of like suitable for a gym area, such as like adding some like very small sort of like simple dumbbell racks, as well as like another one which came with like a whole set of like a water cup and whatnot, and just like adding some small details like that, just trying to make the gym area feel as realistic as possible while not cluttering up too much. And this is actually the attic area that I was actually mentioning. This is pretty much the only area of the home that sort of has this functional fake attic room, if that makes sense. And I don't really know if it's 100% functional, but if you guys want to utilize it, you guys can definitely just like utilize it as a simple bedroom. But to me personally, I feel like it doesn't really matter if this room itself is functional or not, because we have quite a lot of bedrooms going on throughout the entire home as well, and especially since we have that basement area which could definitely be added onto and just like changed up and whatnot. But yeah, we do also add some additional details to the sort of like corridor hallway area that leads up to that basement as well. And I was actually going to add some railing to act as if it was like some sort of safety feature, but I wasn't able to place it properly because it would sort of poke out from the window area and it wouldn't really match with the tiling. So instead what I just did was I sort of just like removed the end piece that sort of connected to the glass window and added this very nice simple sort of plant base thingy to the edge of that area, just to like act as if it was like some sort of protection, if that makes sense, which was, I feel like, was kind of like a nice cool clever way to sort of pretend as if it was like there to cover up and like connect to the railing rather than it being functional, if that makes sense, especially since your Sims can't fall down and it's not really like a realistic thing. I feel like it turned out really nicely to incorporate that rather than leaving it empty. But yeah, moving on into the nursery area for this home now, we actually moving on into the second floor now, which is connected by a different set of stairs. And I was actually thinking of connecting them, but it wasn't really working out. So instead I just kept them as two different individual stairs, which lead up to two different areas of the home. And I feel like this turned out really nice and cozy, especially since it was like a very nice size for this nursery itself as well, because there wasn't really a lot to add anyway, but I feel like it turned out really nice and just like added all of the necessary objects that you would pretty much need in a nursery itself anyway. And I did also utilize one object from the storybook nursery kit, which is the sort of crib itself, because I just feel like that crib alone just looks really nice and it just looks super cozy, and it's sort of just like unique in comparison to the other ones that we have in the game anyway. And I did of course go around the entire nursery and just like add some additional nursery kit features as well, so just like small sort of like clutter pieces just to make it feel a bit more realistic, along with like some nice simple accent walls, which I feel like turned out really nice and sort of like kid friendly, if that makes sense, rather than having a lot of like plain white walls around the entire home. But yeah, so moving on into the final few rooms that we have for this home itself, I actually decided to divide one of the bedrooms up into two different ones because I feel like it was just like a bit too much of a big space for just like one bedroom itself. So instead I just divided it into two different bedrooms along with having two different bathrooms. So one of them is an ensuite, one of them is like a public one that you can access on the second floor. But I feel like this is just like a nice way to sort of just like add some additional space into the house itself. And the bedroom that we're actually starting off with had this very nice emerald greenish sort of color scheme going on throughout this entire room, which I feel like looked really nice and interesting. And I actually really love utilizing a lot of color in the bedrooms itself. And since this was sort of just like one of the upstairs bedrooms, I wanted to make it feel a bit more fun and a bit more like interesting rather than keeping it like plain white and simple. So yeah, it was just like a nice take on just like adding some additional color into the house itself as well, just like trying to make it feel a bit more lively as well, because I feel like having the same repetitive color scheme throughout this entire home is not going to be really that interesting. So yeah, I feel like the bedrooms are like the best opportunity to go and just like add some additional color into the house, if that makes sense. And this was sort of just like nice simple color swatches and stuff like that I was sort of just like going for. And I did of course add a very nice simple fireplace along with like a TV, because I feel like that felt a bit cozy in my opinion. And we do also have pretty much like the same layout and structure of the other bedroom in this bedroom as well, but we're going for a more muted sort of like timber theme for this entire bedroom, for the color scheme itself in particular. So it's a bit more like simplistic and looks a bit more minimalistic and sort of just like fits the more modern vibe and feel of the rest of the home in my opinion, especially since we're using a lot of more of the modern furniture pieces which came from the more modern pack, such as like that dream home decorator bed, which I feel like looks really modern and minimalistic, along with this very nice and simple wardrobe sort of rack area, which I feel like looked really nice, but I feel like this one looked a bit too chic. So I wanted to use these metal ones, which I feel like looked a bit more simple, and I just hanged some additional clothes on it by myself, which I feel like made it look and feel a bit more minimalistic and modern in my opinion, along with just like adding a very nice simple mirror on the wall, as well as like some nice additional seating areas. And I actually noticed that that fireplace looked a bit too big and I don't really like it in that area, even if I sized it down. So instead I just ended up removing those walls instead and actually just utilized the fireplaces which came from the most recent expansion pack, because I feel like these ones looked really modern and it just worked in this space itself really nicely, especially since we were going for most of those color schemes anyway. And this is the bedroom that also has its own ensuite as well, so we do actually end up going for a more modern theme and approach for the bathroom as well. And yeah, we just topped it up with a nice simple rug, which I feel like worked out really nicely and contrasted really nicely with the bed itself as well. Then we moved on into this very simple, minimalistic, modern looking bathroom area, which is the ensuite for this bedroom itself. And then once I pretty much finished up with this bathroom itself, I pretty much went around the entire home, just like added some additional clutter pieces throughout this entire hallway to make it feel a bit more lived in and realistic. And make sure to stick around towards the end of the video if you guys are interested in seeing the tour, so that you guys can see pretty much all of the rooms and the basement that I haven't been able to show in the speed build itself. But yeah, besides that, that is pretty much it for this entire speed build. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think by leaving a like and subscribing, and comment down below what you guys think about this home in particular. If you guys liked it, if you guys didn't like it, I'd love to know your thoughts and suggestions down below. And I do also have a bunch more videos like this on the channel if you guys are interested in things like these. But thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video.